Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another Cambridge podcast. I'm very excited to be here with you again, as we do every single week, because at the end of the day, we feel very strongly that the more education that we can provide to all of you, the better off we're all going to be, because information without education leads to failure. So, whenever you go on the internet or whenever you Google something, you're going to get all kinds of different topics and different answers to different questions and so forth. But at the end of the day, you have to make certain that you have the knowledge and the background to apply all of those questions and answers to your specific situation. Now, today is going to be a fairly short webcast. Because we're going to be talking about traditional IRA and Roth IRA distributions. The vast majority of Americans have the most of their retirement assets either in traditional 401k plans or traditional IRAs. And my definition of traditional means pre-tax. So the money that you put into these plans go in on a pre-tax basis, so you get to deduct it every year from your income taxes. The money grows tax deferred, but then when you pull the money out, you have to pay taxes on everything, not only the contributions, but also the growth of that money and or any matches that you may have received from the employer or your employer at time of contribution. Now, anytime the U.S. government gets involved in some kind of a decision-making process or some rule regarding IRS, taxation and distribution, it seems that nothing is very simple. Obviously, the bureaucratic system that we have in our government creates a tremendous amount of paperwork and legal documents that if you don't understand or you don't make the right decision at the right time and for the right reasons, it may be quite costly to you. So I was hosting a webinar for all my clients last week, and we got into some discussions regarding traditional IRA distributions. And there are so many different issues there that most financial advisors in the marketplace do not understand unless they specialize in distribution areas. And the reason for that is simple. More than likely, close to 97-98% of all financial advisors in the marketplace are generalists, which means that they know a little bit about everything, or they know a little bit about most things. But very few of them know a lot or have a tremendous amount of knowledge about specific areas of investments or insurance planning or retirement planning or distribution or economic models and so forth. We at Cambridge, our goal is not to be all things to all people, but to be some things to some people, because that's where you have your expertise in place. A brain surgeon does not give flu shots. That's not what he does. A general practitioner would do that, but a brain surgeon will do surgeries, and obviously he or she will be paid handsomely for doing that. Today I want to talk about, as I said, IRAs and the distribution aspect of it. Now, one of the questions that I get from clients all the time is, does it make sense for me to just have all my IRAs under one roof or consolidate all my IRAs? And the answer to that is, well, it depends. Now, obviously, if you have just one IRA instead of several IRAs, you obviously have the ability to simplify paperwork, and also you can minimize the fees and the expenses associated with each and every one of those accounts. But at the end of the day, when you start to think about leaving certain IRAs or your IRAs to your heirs because of the fact that you may not need the income from the IRAs, then you may want to consider more than one IRA for each individual heir or beneficiary. And there are a number of reasons for that. Now, statistics do show that the vast majority of IRA funds reside in traditional IRAs. And the reason is simple. Number one, Roth IRAs have only been around 20 years. Roth IRAs required a little bit more education. Most of us have grown up since the 1980s with the traditional marketing for 401ks and IRAs and the benefits of pre-tax, and the fact that many of us are going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement, which is a total fallacy. So therefore, the vast majority of Americans have been making contributions to their traditional 401ks and IRAs as well. Now, traditional IRAs must make, annual required minimum distributions, what we call RMDs, to their owners starting at age 70 and a half. This basically works contrary to the intent of leaving IRAs to your heirs, because the RMDs are going to deplete the IRA while the owner is alive. So it may not be the very best tool to use if you want to leave money for your heirs. Now, Roth IRAs, to the contrary, have no RMDs or required minimum distribution for their owners. So if you have all your IRA funds in traditional IRAs and you're interested in leaving a portion of it to your heirs and or beneficiaries, then you may want to consider converting that portion that you want to leave to your heirs of your traditional IRAs to a Roth IRA. Pay that tax today, but allow that Roth IRA to continue to grow on behalf of those beneficiaries without having the obligation to dip into those funds at age 70 and a half. So those are things that you may want to consider. Those are the types of conversations that we have with our clients when they come in, with lots of IRAs, and they have lots of IRA questions, and many of them have $1 million plus in IRAs because they have had 401k jobs where they made large contributions, and obviously there were matches, and then they left that employer, so they rolled the money over to their own IRA. Now, also, there's something that needs to be talked about, regarding leaving IRAs for your spouses and or beneficiaries, or your surviving spouse and or beneficiaries. Now, an individual who inherits an IRA from a spouse, has a unique choice, and this is actually a very good choice. Either they can accept the inherited IRA, or they can convert it to an owner IRA, in other words, to their own IRA. Now, making the decision whether to keep it as an inherited IRA or converting that to an owner IRA, the answer to that, it depends on the timing, the reasons, the necessity for that money, and so forth. So, keeping an inherited IRA lets a spouse beneficiary under the age of 59 and a half withdraw funds from the IRA without having to pay an early withdrawal penalty of 10%. So let's say if you have a husband and wife, the husband is 52 years of age, the wife is 50 years of age, the husband has a premature death, and he or she, or in this case, a husband has an IRA with $100,000. If the surviving spouse keeps the IRA as an inherited IRA, she can start taking distributions out of the IRA at her age 50 without having to worry about any type of pre-distribution penalties, which is equal to 10%. Now, converting the IRA into an owned IRA lets a surviving spouse obviously defer the required minimum distribution until age 70 and a half. So if the surviving spouse needs some money, then leaving the IRA as an inherited IRA is a good tool because other than the taxes on the distribution, there's not going to be a 10% penalty. But if the surviving spouse has no need for that IRA, then she, in this case scenario, can just convert that IRA and make it her own IRA, and then allow that money to continue to grow. Again, she was age 50 at the time that her spouse passed away. She doesn't really need to start taking distribution until the age of 70 and a half. So those are things that they can do. Now, obviously, another option for the surviving spouse, in this case, the 50-year-old whose husband passed away at the age of 52, if she needs money and she decided to keep it as an inherited IRA and she starts to withdraw money, then, after she reaches the age of 59 and a half, she does have the ability, if she no longer needs that money or if it makes sense for her, she can take that inherited IRA and then convert that to her own IRA, and then obviously that would become her IRA, and then required minimum distributions will then start again at age 70 and a half. Now, obviously, these choices that I'm giving you are only available if the spouse is the sole beneficiary to the IRA. Now, that being said, consider naming your spouse as a sole beneficiary of one IRA, while funding intended transfers to other beneficiaries through one or more IRAs. So keeping your beneficiaries separate provides a number of beneficial tools for those individuals that are managing these IRAs. Now, the other question is, well, what if the beneficiary to this IRA is a non-spouse? Well, a non-spouse who inherits an IRA as the sole designated beneficiary named on the IRA's beneficiary form can take required minimum distributions from it under a schedule that, pretty much stretches over the rest of his or her life. Now, this is very good because it can provide decades worth of compounding tax-favored investment returns in the IRA. Because if you're taking your RMDs based on the beneficiary age, let's say you have a 25-year-old son or daughter who inherited a parent's IRA, then he or she can extend that IRA for many, many decades down the line, and only the portion that is taken on an annual basis will be taxed, and the rest of the money will continue to grow on a tax-deferred basis. On the other hand, if this same IRA has multiple beneficiaries, then RMDs for all beneficiaries on the stretch schedule is based on the oldest who has the shortest life expectancy. So this can actually be very costly to the younger beneficiaries. So let's say that there are 3 beneficiaries in an IRA, and there are 3 children that are beneficiaries. One is 15 years of age, the other one is 20, and then the other one is 30 years of age in this scenario. Then obviously if the stretch is going to start after the death of the owner of the IRA, then the calculations are going to be based on the 30-year-old. So the distribution is going to be greater, and they're going to have a greater impact on the other 2 children, which are ages 20 and 15. So if you're going to do it that way, it's better to have 3 separate IRAs and name each one of those children, the 15-year-old, the 20-year-old, and then the 30-year-old, in their own separate IRA, so there's no commingling of funds on the stretch side at time of distribution. The other question that I get from clients is, Bert, I have this IRA, can I name a charity? If a charity is one of the beneficiaries, the situation is actually worse, and it can get really, really bad from a distribution perspective. It is deemed, a charity for that matter, it is deemed to have a life expectancy of 0, so no beneficiary can take a stretch. The IRA is going to have to be paid out in only 5 years if the IRA owner died before he or she was supposed to take the required minimum distributions. If the owner died after the commencement of the required minimum distributions, then it must be paid out to the beneficiaries over the owner's life expectancy in the year of death, but it cannot be longer than 17 years. So these rules of distributions from IRAs, not only do they make it difficult for everyone from if you have multiple beneficiaries, but also you have to take into consideration, when did the owner of the IRA pass away? Did he or she pass away prior to start taking the required minimum distributions, or did he or she pass away after commencement of the required minimum distributions? Because the rules of engagement are totally different. Now, obviously, there's a solution. So, if some of these problems of, taking before or after the RMD can be fixed, they can actually be fixed after an IRA owner dies. And the way to do that is you want to divide that single inherited IRA with multiple beneficiaries into separate IRAs with one beneficiary each by the end of the following year. So if someone dies in 2018, you have until the end of 2019 in order to execute that. But at the end of the day, trying to do something after someone dies becomes costly and also creates a tremendous amount of paperwork. If this is what you want to do for your family, and you want to be able to, while you're alive, to segregate and segment IRA distributions for different beneficiaries, then the best thing to do is to do it while you're alive, because it's the simplest and the safest way to set up separate IRAs in advance. So that way your family is not going to have to deal with, all of the paperwork and all the requirement, of the inherited IRA guidelines and so forth. Now, the good thing is that when separate IRAs are set up for each heir and/or beneficiary, then they can be funded, with assets that are selected for each individual beneficiary goal and objective. So, for example, if you're doing something for the spouse, for the surviving spouse, due to his or her age, you may want to be a little bit more conservative in your investments, like bonds, etc. But if you're doing this for a grandchild who may be, 5, 6, 7 years of age, or 10 or 15 years of age, then perhaps being a little bit more aggressive in the investment choices makes sense. So again, by separating the IRAs and making certain that you understand the goals and objectives that you want at distribution time, and also the goals and objectives for the individual who will be the ultimate beneficiary of the IRA, then obviously it makes a lot of sense to do it this way. Now, there's something called disclaimer planning. And it is a valuable tool in estate planning. And in my 28-year career in financial services, this has only happened 3 times. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have an adult who happens to be in a high tax bracket and also happens to be the beneficiary of an IRA, but he or she really does not need that IRA. They actually have the ability to disclaim that IRA in which they were beneficiaries, and then it passes over to the next in line. In each, if each IRA has a single beneficiary, then each can have a chosen contingent beneficiary to be next in line, such as let's say the beneficiary's child, and so forth. But if one IRA has multiple beneficiaries, disclaimers are going to be much, much more difficult to put together from a business and a distribution perspective. So because of the fact that we at Cambridge do so much work in the area of tax-preferred retirement distribution planning, and we do provide a customized tax-preferred retirement blueprint for our clients. Not only do we have the ability to make certain that the income coming out of all these investments become tax-free through certain techniques that we use at Cambridge, and we also want to make certain that we can protect our clients from the 4 major risks that they're facing every single day, which is the risk of dying too soon, the risk of living too long, the risk of living with a disability, and then last but not least, the risk of living with eroding factors. But we also do distribution planning. And the distribution planning takes into consideration all of these areas that we have talked about in this podcast, because you do have the ability to manage assets from the grave if you do it the right way. Remember, what the IRS giveth, the IRS can taketh away. So doing this type of planning becomes very critical if you want to have a successful retirement life, not only for you and your surviving spouse, but also for the family unit overall. And as we finish every single podcast that we do weekly for all of you, our number one goal here at Cambridge, and my number one goal, is to kind of help you change the way that you see things. And the reason for that is that when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So again, thank you so very much for your time today, and we'll see you next week for another Cambridge podcast. Have a great day.